Thank you everyone for being here. Thanks for the folks that we have in the audience. Couple of little housekeeping things that I wanted to bring up. First off, this is our panel on adjusting to the demographic pothole in college admissions. We've got a great panel in this group today. I'm going to have everyone introduce themselves. We'll just kind of go around in the order on my screen. You've got Keith and Andy, then Blake and David. And I wanted to point out that while this panel is, the headline is adjusting to the demographic pothole, we are not really going to delve into data itself. Nikki is going to post up the two WICHE data, or the reports, meaning other people's research and reports. We have the WICHE data and we have what Nathan Graw has produced. And, you know, regardless of whether this data pans out on the high side or the low side, the reality is that you either want to harvest the best group of students you can and move them all the way through the pipeline into graduation, or you may have to do some adjustments. You're going to be facing some significant changes in your recruitment pool. The interesting thing I think that we can talk about is, and particularly with all of you, because you're in different phases of using advanced analytics, but what are the data analytics that you are engaging at your universities, and as well as some of the compelling questions about additional ways, new programs, innovation, recruitment, whatever it may be, that's helping you plan for the immediacy and for the long term. So as I mentioned, we run these panels in two different sections. We have our general session where we have a number of folks in the audience right now who will get to listen to that. And we will record this and have this in this very cool video aligned transcript available to everybody. And then we'll get to a section where we're going to dismiss the audience and we'll move into what's called our private section. And the private section will be for those journalists that have asked that their questions, no one else gets to hear the responses. So we'll tell you which reporter that came from, and then that individual reporter will get that segment of questions. For those of you who are here in the audience, if you have additional questions you want to send in right now, please do so. We've got a pretty stacked list, but we'll try and fit them in. And it's pretty, we can always make contacts later on for anyone that wants to have a offline or a deeper conversation with our panelists. So just know that that's available for you if you're attending. So now what I'd like to do is go around and have you introduce yourself a little bit, give us a scope of the size of your university, maybe the incoming freshman, whatever kind of metric you think is important, and then anything that you think is significant about your university and or yourself, in a short little snippet, and then we'll parse that out as we move along. So let's start with you, Keith.
Great, thanks Jennifer, and hi everybody. My name is Keith Ramsdell, and I'm currently serving as Vice President for Enrollment Management and Marketing at Ashland University in Ashland, Ohio. Just so everybody knows, I've been there, I think this is week 13. So prior to that, I was the Director of Graduate Enrollment and Assistant Dean of the Graduate College at Bowling Green State University. So I also bring the public university perspective as well, especially the graduate perspective. At Ashland, we have about 8,000 students total, about 6,400 undergraduates, 1,600 graduate. But one of the things that's really unique about Ashland is we also have the largest correctional education program in the country. It's entirely virtual. We have about 3,500 students enrolled in correctional education in prisons across the country. And so that's kind of unique, a unique aspect of our institution. And then I'll also just mention the fact that prior to Ashland, again, working in graduate education exclusively for 15 years prior to that. So I also have served as president of NAGAP, which is the Professional Association for Graduate Enrollment Management, and I currently serve in the past president position right now.
Thank you. Andy.
Hi, everybody. Jennifer, thanks for having us here today. My name is Andy Hanna. I'm the chairman and one of the co-founders of OThought. I'm also an adjunct professor of analytics at the University of Pittsburgh. And OThought, we have a advanced analytics platform that guides colleges and universities to make informed decisions throughout the student life cycle by better understanding the individual. What that means is that our platform helps these institutions enroll the best fit students who are going to persist and graduate, get great jobs, and remain engaged as alumni. And the way that we do that is that we understand the data and analytics about an individual from the day that we meet them, or the day our partners meet them, through the days that they're active alumni. So when we learn about somebody when they're in high school, informs about what happens to them or how they behave in college and the type of job they get and how they engage as alumni. And so we put that into one platform to help universities better understand the individual, not just cohorts or groups of individuals, but the actual individual, and helping them optimize their journey through the student life cycle.
Great, thanks, Andy. Blake.
Hey, good afternoon, everybody. Blake Betzold, and I've been blessed for the last 3 years to get to serve as the Vice President for Enrollment Management at Arkansas Tech University. We're just under 12,000 students in Russellville, Arkansas. We say we're one university with 2 campuses, so we offer everything from workforce credentials and associate's degrees up through bachelor's, master's, and a few doctoral degrees. Excuse me. Like Keith, I actually have some experience on the graduate side as well. So I started my career in graduate education at the University of Alabama and did various roles in that regard for about 8 years. Had the opportunity to go to the University of West Alabama, which was a much smaller regional institution, as their director of admissions and enrollment for 3 years before taking the job I have now. So I've had perspective on state flagship down to regional public and on the graduate and undergraduate side.
Great, thank you. David.
Well, good afternoon, everyone. It's good to be here. My name is David Houtinen, Jr. I'm the Vice President for Enrollment at St. Mary's College of Maryland. I've been at St. Mary's for 4 years now, having arrived in 2017. St. Mary's College of Maryland is a public liberal arts college designated as a standalone honors college. We're only one of 2 such institutions in the country. So as the first and the National Public Honors College, ultimately, we believe in honors for all of our students. Our honors is not just a standalone program, it's the entire institution. In and outside of the classroom, ultimately what this means is we set expectations for ourselves and for each other. I come to St. Mary's College after having served at 3 other institutions, all in undergraduate enrollment, and all in Massachusetts. So this is my first foray outside of the New England area. I worked at a large flagship public institution, a large private urban institution, and a medium-sized Catholic college before coming to St. Mary's. St. Mary's College has about 1,500 students as a quintessential liberal arts and sciences college. We enroll 450 to 500 new first-year and transfer students each year.
Terrific, thank you. So we have a wide range, and you actually know almost all of them, don't you? That's good. So this will be helpful.
Benefit of experience, right?
About the only thing we're missing is someone from California.
True.
Okay, so my first question is going to be, how worried are you about enrollment projections next year and in 5 years? And how worried do you think your colleagues are? So let's see if we can round robin this primarily to Keith, Blake, and David. So Keith?
Oh, that's a good question. And I think, I think many of us were hopeful that, once we made it through last fall, that we were out of the woods. And unfortunately, many didn't anticipate, in fact, the majority of us didn't anticipate how long the pandemic would, persist. Mm-hmm. And so, what I've shared in with many colleagues, conversations about the fact that, at least for last fall, most of our recruitment cycles were pretty well along. On the graduate side, we were mostly done. On the undergraduate side, many schools were well into their recruitment cycle. And so fall didn't turn out to be maybe quite as bad as it could be. In fact, many graduates programs, especially online programs, were in many cases way up in enrollment. Unfortunately, this is our first experience for all of us recruiting entirely through one full cycle in the middle of a pandemic, when we can't use our traditional techniques and strategies for recruitment. And so I would say for this fall, like many of my peers, we're very concerned about the numbers. We're looking for every opportunity that we can to continue to connect, to continue to build enrollment for the fall. Honestly, the concern for the 2020 and the cliff that everybody talks about, I'm almost more hopeful for that than I am for this fall, only because we have time to plan for that. The demographics, I get the demographics, and I understand everybody's concerned with that. And I see Andy nodding, and we're fortunate because I'm new at Ashland and we're new to OTHOT, and we're very excited about the opportunities to partner there. And we think that will be huge for us moving forward as an institution. But I'm initially concerned about this fall and what we're going to be able to do with our numbers right now. We're just we're a little bit behind, and trying to catch up is going to be tough at this point.
Great, thank you. Blake, something to add to that?
Yeah, I'll echo that 100%. I am more confident in the long term than I am in the short term. A lot of us enrollment managers, we talk about this being an art and a science, and unfortunately, I feel like it's more of an art right now, that things I could rely on in the past, are not proving to be as effective in looking at the yield, especially. So, looking at the way our fall 20 class yielded was not at all what we would have thought based on the application volume we saw, visit volume, admit pool size and things like that. So it's really working with products, and we're lucky to get to work with Andy and his team as well at OTHOT, looking at products to be comfortable with predicting the yield, because, we're all marketers, right? We can all go out and drive application growth, but it's working those students through the funnel, and kind of that second level of engagement is where we're really focused on right now, because our app pool is up, and I know some places are not, having that luxury, but we've got the app pool, but it's how can we move them through to take those next steps and get their schedule and confirm their housing and, do their orientation and things like that. So that's my short-term concern is yield for this fall, for sure.
All right, thank you. David?
There are days when I wonder why I put my career in the hands of the decisions of 17 to 18-year-old students. As I've said to the board, typically, the crystal ball that we all use to look at, and of course analytics support this, but it's normally a bit cloudy. And this year, my crystal ball is really downright muddy in terms of projecting what we can expect moving forward. Last year, we experienced a shift in yield, and as we did our analysis, it really was primarily due to having to cancel our on-campus programming. As Keith had said earlier, in the undergraduate space, we are already so far along in our recruitment funnel that impact was mitigated. But certainly, as we did our analysis, not being able to host students on campus in April in particular, I can draw a direct line to a difference in enrollment that we experienced due to that. That being said, we had a very strong year last year in terms of enrollment, and I think that was likely due to the fact that we are small and nimble, and we can talk maybe a little bit more about that later. Like Blake, we've seen an increase in the number of applications that we've received this year, following significant increases last year as well. So we do, when as we monitor our enrollment funnel, we have seen really growth throughout the funnel, and it's playing itself through. But where it goes with yield is that really at this point is the unknown, and we really have we've built out a tremendous programming to try to influence and mitigate that. So as we're tracking positively, I have to say I'm cautiously optimistic And if you knew me, that would probably be no surprise to you that I am optimistic. But at the same time, I'm doing really being careful to set expectations with the executive team and the board while we're managing this year. But we do still have our sights on 5 years down the road and making sure that we've done all the work to set ourselves up to be successful once sort of that the cliff starts to occur.
Okay, great. So in this next set of questions, Haley Busta from EdTech Higher Ed, which is a CDW publication, she's sent me a nice long list of them. I might kind of bounce around just to kind of keep us on time. And then Andy, I'm going to ask you at some point to explain, to put in layman's terms, what it is, help us understand what analytics are, right? Let's pretend we don't know anything, which I probably don't, right? So, give us a parallel. So think about how you can encapsulate that briefly. So the first question from Haley is from the rest of you all. What specific data points are you collecting or looking at during this year's recruitment cycle? And is that different from previous years? So if you jump in here to, if someone has a great answer, maybe not all of you want to address that.
I'll jump in, Jennifer, with this one, if I may. Really, I think the only things that we're looking at a little bit differently, obviously we're all looking at the typical funnel data. But when I think about what we're looking at that's a little bit differently, that's tracking a little bit differently, we're trying to look at programs, the academic programs a little bit more deeply to see how the pandemic is maybe impacting our individual programs. I've taken a closer look at our in-state versus out-of-state applicant pool, and what we're seeing, and we've heard this, I think, for months now, that our applicant pool is definitely making decisions to stay closer to home. So our out-of-state numbers are down this year. Our in-state percentage is higher than it typically is, which is a little worrisome, especially when we're in the middle of the Midwest. And when you talk about the cliff coming, that's a dangerous situation to be in for the long haul. And then I think the other numbers that we're concerned about are first generation students of color. Those areas, again, those populations tending to be down a little bit because of the pandemic, maybe wanting to stay a little bit closer to home. And again, we're seeing some of that at Ashland as well this year.
Okay. David, and then Blake, maybe?
Sure. I just want to say, as we're looking at our data, we're looking at the demographics, we're looking at our programming. In addition, as Keith said, really being closely monitoring our funnel data and really monitoring how effective are we being at conversion from one point in the funnel to another. And we're nimble enough that we are adjusting our strategies along the way to be able to affect, as best as we can project, the conversion rates from one area to another. And one of those is really, as we've had to move away from on-campus programming to more virtual programming, we've been really closely monitoring sort of attendance and participation rates in all of our programming, and making adjustments along the way to influence the behavior of students through the funnel.
Thank you. Blake, some thoughts on that?
Yeah, so Keith touched on a little bit, but for us this year, it's really looking at striations within the applicant pool. In the past, you'd look at your application number and maybe work percentages down from there. But at Tech, we're 94% Arkansan. So what's happening in Arkansas is going to be the biggest, thing for me to monitor, and then kind of the contiguous states after that. And if you break down, we look at distance from campus, so not just necessarily in-state, out-of-state, but even within the state, how far are you? Because as Keith said, students are choosing to go closer to home. And we saw that a lot in our fall 20 class. So while I'm pleased that our applications are up for this year, we also have to look at things like, okay, from 50 to 150 miles, you're actually down compared to last year. And your Caucasian students are down, you're up in minority groups, which you're not going to yield as high. So it's really looking at the breakdown. We're also starting to pull in, kind of consumer ratings, because we know that our income level, formerly EFC levels of our students, will play a large part in who will actually get to enroll. using that for predictions, and also trying to better leverage the aid that we have in terms of yielding the class. So.
Okay, so then this is maybe a good time, Andy, for you to give us that high-level overview, make data analytics easy for us.
Okay, I think you can break analytics into two pieces. First, what we have are what we'll call traditional analytics, and those are descriptive and diagnostic. So you can think about having a spreadsheet to analyze what happened and why did it happen. And that's sort of a backwards sort of look and view of your data. And that's a critical piece because that's a building block, right? So if you can't understand or diagnose what happened, it's very difficult to move on to the next level. The advanced analytics is more about predictions and prescriptions. So once we understand what happened and why, we can then predict what is going to happen. So we can think about this as each individual students, can we predict their likelihood to enroll or their likelihood to persist or graduate or get a job or whatever? What we can do is we can understand their behaviors through these very sophisticated algorithms and then predict the likelihood of the outcome happening that we want to have happen. So if we predict somebody is 30% likely to enroll through those algorithms, our next step is how do we maximize, if that's a student we really want to come to our university, how do we maximize the probability to get them to enroll? And that's called using prescriptions. And those prescriptions could be financial aid, it could be a marketing program, it could be a visit to the campus, it could be a call to them at their home. And what the algorithms can do is say, okay, we understand this individual and they're more driven by relationship than they are driven by money. So you're much better off focusing on that visit or that telephone call rather than seeing how much money that we can get that individual. And those prescriptions help us maximize the probability of the outcome that we want. So I think that's probably the best way to think about it, as sort of traditional analytics, backward looking, descriptive and diagnostic, and advanced as being what's going to, can we predict what's going to happen? And if we can predict it, can we maximize the outcome that we want?
So this is a perfect segue to Haley's other question, which is, which of these recruiting tactics are you changing? How has the analytics, can you identify a couple that you are changing based on analytics? Give her something concrete. Anyone got an idea here? Go ahead, Blake. Is that you?
Yeah, so we're using, with all the enrollment decline and things like that, we're tightening up some of our marketing spend and trying to be really strategic about that. One of the things we're using, as Andy mentioned, is kind of, really using the analytics to decide who's going to benefit from a certain marketing piece, perhaps. Who's going to benefit most for a push to take an action step, whether it's finish the application or come to campus, take a visit, come to a senior day, whatever. And so not mailing everybody print pieces, not doing campaigns for the whole, kind of joke about the shotgun and sniper rifle. It's really kind of honing in on target populations for certain things rather than just scattering, the spaghetti at the wall and seeing what sticks. So we're dipping into analytics to guide some of our print campaigns, and we're also starting to play around with need-based aid and leveraging that as a way to ensure enrollment.
Okay. Some add-ons from Keith or David?
I was just going to say, for us, it's really, our analytics really have been focused on how we're leveraging need-based aid in order to influence students based on their behaviors and activities leading up to the moment of determining what aid they should be receiving and offering that aid. I think one of the things that, likely we've all done this, I guess it probably depends on the place in the country that you are, we do know that if a student visits campus, they are more likely to enroll. And with the pandemic, ultimately, that strategy or that was taken away from us. In particular for this past year, really between April and through July, that really impacted us. We were able to sort of begin to offering one-on-one campus tours in August And as a strategy, as we built towards, I think that's helped contribute to the increase in our applicant pool, because we were able to actually see more students visiting campus that way and delivering a more on-brand experience. We have a 9-to-1 student-faculty ratio. So the experience in the classroom is very tailored and personal. Now we're able to deliver that in this way, and I hope that we're able to continue that with resources moving forward. But what we've really changed is understanding that we don't have some of the relationship development that we have typically in terms of where staff are able to go out on the road. And as Blake alluded to, we have implemented a very significant digital recruitment program.
So this is interesting that Haley asked. She said, are you using analytics to help you deliver tailored messaging to other groups, not limited to students? So perhaps their parents or teachers?
Yeah, yes, that's actually very much part of our communication flow, that we are looking at all of our messages and making a conscious decision. Is this just a student message? Is this just a parent message? Or is it a message that needs to go both, based on what we plan for the call to action to be for that distinct message? But we have been using analytics as part of that digital campaign to be targeting parents specifically, to be targeting counselors specifically, as well as students specifically in the digital worlds that they live. And I know other schools must be doing this as well, because as I look at my feed, I must be targeted as a prospective parent by a number of different different schools.
Yeah, I just went through that with my own son. He's up at a private college in Oregon, so
Yep. Yeah.
I had 4 emails that I knew what to deal with.
Mm-hmm.
Another extension of this question, Haley's interested in COVID. So have messaging changed around COVID and regarding vaccine administrations? Have any of you, do you have specific examples about that, or something that you want to bring up?
I don't have an example about the vaccine yet. I feel like that's becoming a very hot topic, and it's something we'll probably address in a couple of weeks. But the pandemic has really altered the way we handle invitations to campus. I think David mentioned that. So we can't accommodate the volume of student visitors that we would want to. And so we're having to be very strategic about who we invite to tours and who we invite to visit programs. A great example is we have a senior visit day in the spring called Time Out for Tech, where we would have 1,800 freshmen and their families on campus, at the Coliseum and venturing around. Well, and now we can have anything over a group of 30. And so having to take that event, spread it out over multiple days, really be smart about who we invite and let attend that, and then incorporating virtual presentations and pieces into that, that's been a complete 180 from what we would normally do this time of year in terms of, visit events and yield events. So the pandemic is definitely affecting that. And it feels like that's going to persist at least into the summer, if not next fall as well.
It's interesting, Blake, that we can't even host groups that large on campus. So hence our sort of one-on-one. And at the moment we're on a hiatus, and for our one-on-one visits until the pandemic hopefully quiets down a little bit, until we can relaunch those. I think once the pandemic hit in late spring, we did pivot on messaging then, actually. And then through the summer, really messaging about being a small institution. We're in a rural area, beautiful waterfront location, that this actually would be a safe place to be coming to school compared to perhaps another type of location. And so I think that helped contribute to our enrollment success this past year. But also we have 2/3 of our students are living on campus, so compared to what we normally would see. So part of our messaging, and it's interesting, we have always had an ethos called the St. Mary's Way, which really is about responsibility to ourselves, each other, and to the environment. But that hasn't necessarily been part of our marketing messages. But with COVID, and the responsibility that we now need to take for ourselves and for one another, this is now front and center to who we are. And I think that really is resonating in the marketplace. And as we think about that shift in messaging, the St. Mary's Way, what it's really doing, it's responding to the empathy that we as institutions need to be showing our students, understanding the challenges that they have, and that we're going to meet them with and join them in those challenges for their success.
Yeah. Jennifer, if I can just tag on, we've done a lot of the same things that David and Blake have talked about, as far as, sending that messaging out, getting it out through, email, text messages, and so forth. But the one thing that's really been quite remarkable to me at Ashland is that our president, and this started, long before I got there, but throughout this entire year, our president has done a series of town halls. Town halls that included not just the immediate campus community, but essentially the broader community, and that has really been remarkable and has been exceptionally well received, just to make sure that on a consistent basis we're getting that information out there. The community is invited to participate, ask questions openly, and those questions are addressed in real time, which I think has been a great opportunity for him to really kind of address parent and student concerns.
Right. That's very interesting. We have another question here from Hillary Burns, who's a reporter at the Boston Business Journal, which might seem a little, why would it be the Business Journal? But I think she's looking for a larger piece, not just for Boston. And her question is, what student demographics are you targeting as traditional students diminish in numbers? Are there any particular groups that you're maybe, and I don't know what she's defining by the word traditional, but maybe she's getting at, can you tell us the other kinds of innovation things you might be doing now that you wouldn't have been doing, perhaps looking at what's going to happen in 2025?
It's interesting. I'm glad you said you didn't know what you meant by traditional, because I was wondering that myself. What does she mean by traditional? As a public institution, we have a commitment, a statutory commitment to serving underrepresented students in the state of Maryland in particular. And as we've done the analysis, we know that the demographics are going to be shifting. The sort of traditional Caucasian college-going population is declining, and other populations of color, BIPOC students, are increasing. So as we think about this, we're strategically working to make sure that we are building the relationships with various communities, both in terms of working with community-based organizations, religious-based organizations, as well as ensuring that perhaps students who may not be, let's say, maybe a first-generation family who may not be comfortable sending their student to a four-year institution, that we're directly working with those students and families to help them understand that they, in fact, have a place here. At the same time, we're building a number of relationships and strengthening partnerships with community colleges.
Keith or Blake, anything to add in that?
Sure, I can say at Ashland, Ashland historically has been very traditionally oriented. And when I say that, the definition that I would use is the direct from high school population, primarily living on campus. And so beyond that, and we're just starting to get into this a little bit more, the populations that we're looking at are really, how do we expand and at least stabilize that population in preparation for 2025, but also adding additional programs at the graduate level, adding programs that would target primarily, or not target, but certainly serve the degree completer, or, through our corporate partners, we have opportunities for those populations to come back and to complete either an undergraduate degree or to pursue a graduate degree. And so those types of opportunities, certainly anything online, right? So even some of those, what we would maybe consider traditional, and many of those traditional populations now are now looking to online options, so that, there's some specialty kinds of programs that are out there that we're trying to look into. And so launching of new programs that would attract a different type of population is also on our radar.
I think one of the benefits of the pandemic really has been, we have a traditional faculty, traditional academic programs as a liberal arts and sciences college. And one of the benefits of the pandemic and having to switch to hybrid learning is now, I think, a faculty who now sees that this actually, there is benefit here, and this actually is something that is appropriate and can be appropriate at a more of a traditional institution.
Great. Andy, I had a larger question for you since you work with a lot of university folks. This is also part of Hillary's question. Do you have some insight about how enrollment strategies have changed in the remote world? Can you maybe speak a little more, broadly about trends that you're noticing?
Yeah, I think first thing I would say is that if we think about the 25 to 30, so the second half of this decade as the movie, COVID was somewhat of a trailer to that movie. It gave us a preview to what's coming in front of us. And there's no doubt we have this supply demand issue that's rising. Right, so Nathan Graw tells us, we're going to have 450,000 less high school students, right? When high school graduates going to college in that second half of the decade, that's a big gap. And so what we're seeing is to think about fit in a way that and allow us to use data and analytics to drive our population of potential students. So getting beyond where we traditionally may recruit, or thinking about, I think COVID has also opened up a whole different distance learning concept that we haven't quite figured out yet, but we will. That's going to open up our universities and colleges to a whole group of students that aren't necessarily in our backyard. And so what we need to understand is how those students will fit with the programs that we have, with the outcomes that we're generating at our colleges and universities. And I think that our most forward-looking colleges and universities, and I think you heard it from all of our panelists, are thinking ahead just beyond their backyard about how do I reach out and match those individuals to the programs and the type of school that we are. And I think that from a bigger picture perspective, that is a wave of strategy, I think, that's at the very crest.
Great, thank you. So before I jump into this next group of questions, I want to go back and correct myself. The first group was actually from Higher Ed Dive. Haley writes for them. This next group is Ed Tech Higher Ed, and this is Amelia Pang, and her questions are, what are your long-term plans for attracting and supporting disadvantaged students, such as those from low socioeconomic background, those with disabilities, and undocumented immigrants? And can technology play a role here? Blake. Yeah,
I can start with that one. So at Tech, we're very proud of the work we do to support disadvantaged students. Before the pandemic, we were almost 50% Pell eligible, 40% first gen. Those stats can go on. And something we like to talk about is social mobility. So there are a lot of rankings that show we're #1 in the state for, increasing that student success after college. And so we already have kind of, really tried to build that into our mission, to serve those students. Some things we're thinking about doing for the future, for us, it's not necessarily just that the overall numbers are changing, but it's how they're changing. And we've all kind of talked about that. So it's not just that the number of high school graduates is going down. It's that of that smaller number, it's predicted that, there will be the lower affinity for going to college right away. But then also that the demographics of that number, so the cultural shifts are important to look at. For us, Arkansas is projected to have an increase in Hispanic students, a quite substantial one. And so we're already a campus that's 11% Hispanic. What do we need to do to make those students feel more comfortable in choosing Tech as a destination, either for right out of college as traditional students or on down the line? So that's a big thing we're thinking about is, do we possibly position ourselves as an HSI and try to get to that 25% number or higher and get some assistance from the federal government to do that? And then, as somebody mentioned online, that will always be key for non-traditional, in my opinion. So what can we do, whether it's prior learning assessment or badging or, certificate, workforce development type programs to get students into those online programs to kind of meet them where they are. An initiative we started last year was going after our own stopped out students. So students that had dropped out of tech for whatever reason and had not enrolled at another institution. And technology plays a huge role in that, because 95+% of those don't want to re-enter their on-campus program. They want to enter, an online degree where they can complete that. So yes, I see technology only growing importance with online programs and even traditional hybrid type programs moving forward.
Keith and David, I'd love your insight in this topic as well.
Well, I guess the first thing that I would add, Jennifer, is simply, to agree with a lot of what Blake said. We're doing a lot of the same at Ashland, in particular on the student support side and the retention side, and using technology to do that very thing. The early warning kind of systems to be able to say, hey, we've got some students who are in trouble here, regardless of what their background is. I think that this really comes into play, but in particular with first generation and students of color, where they may not have the home environment, traditional home environment that can encourage them to look for the help when they initially need it. I think that's on us to say, well, now we've put some pieces and parts into play. We've got the technology now for us to internally support our students in that regard. And that's really been our first move in that direction. We still have a lot of work to do on the recruitment side, and I think we'll be moving in that direction here over the next couple of years, especially with OTHOT's help as we look at our current profile and where we need to move in building out that profile. But providing that support has been our top priority.
David, any additional add-ons?
Just briefly, one of our approaches as we're looking at as we're working to build these relationships has to develop a programmatic support services here on campus. For students who are, let's say, for first generation, low socioeconomic areas, that they develop student success programs for them to have affinity-based groups while they're here on campus. And we found that's been very successful, sort of building those relationships externally, because those that support students from disadvantaged backgrounds are looking for that same level of support to be provided once they enroll at the institution. And we found that success by developing specific programs designed to do that. And then, as Keith said, really making sure that we're monitoring student success and various retention measures over the course of the students, in particular their first and second year, to ensure their persistence.
Okay, great, thanks. So in the interest of trying to make that promise of this being an hour or less, I'm going to go to one more question in the general group, and then we will close off and move into our private section, because we have two pretty hefty groups of questions here that we may not be able to get into all of them. But this other question is, what are the problems you're trying to solve with current data analytics that analytics currently don't solve? So give us something like, oh man, if only we could do this, is kind of the question. We could do this at the moment, but we can't do that. This is what we're hoping for. Andy, maybe you want to start with that?
Yeah, I can tell you what we're hearing from our partner schools and other schools that we talk to. And there's this idea of how do we at the top end of the funnel identify the best fit students earlier, right, wherever they may be in the country. And again, that is by having a mechanism or a way to understand whether or not those students do fit is really the beginning of the answer to that question. You can fill that funnel with as many people as you want, but if they don't fit your institution or the programs that you offer, you're going to have issues really building a robust funnel. And I'd say that gets even more complicated because as we move to more of a test optional environment, we may know less about students than we did a couple of years ago. And so how do we know more about them as individuals when we're actually getting less data? And so we have to be much more sophisticated about how we build relationships, how we understand them, who they are, why they might fit, how we communicate to them. And one last thing I'll add, I know I'm using up a lot of time here, but remember, Gen Z has been taught that everything should be personalized, right? The way that they consume their music, Spotify, Amazon, Netflix, you name it, the way that they consume is everything's been personalized to me. We need to start to really think about that from an educational and institutional basis so that we're matching what they're expecting as they start to look at colleges and universities.
Some thoughts from the rest of our folks? Keith? You're on mute.
Well, I was going to tag team with Andy a little.
No, we got you now.
You can't. Oh, you got me? Okay. I was just going to tag team on something that Andy said. It reminded me that about a week ago, I had a conversation. In fact, I was doing a panel with some representatives of EAB and NAGAP and some research that we've been doing with them, and a series of studies, a series of pulse surveys that we've done with some graduate enrollment professionals across the country through NAGAP. And when it comes to the data, one of the things that I said we don't have data on yet is what is motivating a student to jump into your funnel right now, because we don't know, right? So if we're not able to get a test score, if they're not coming in through an inquiry form, and we know based on our national data right now that students are making their decisions, they're applying later. In fact, as of I don't know, a month ago, EAB had reported out that 40% of high school seniors who indicated the intent to go to college next fall had not yet applied to a single college or university. 40%. And that was a month ago, right? That was between Thanksgiving and Christmas. And so we asked the question, well, what data exists that indicates what is motivating a student to apply right now? And that doesn't exist. Nobody knows. And so suddenly over the holidays, we started to see a bump in some applications, not just at Ashland, but some of you probably saw the Common App numbers January 1 skyrocketed from the weeks prior. And on campus we were kind of joking, was that because mom and dad suddenly said you got to push, you got to get out next fall, and I'm not letting you wait any longer, you've got to apply someplace. I don't know, but that would be Andy, you said helping you to decide, predicting once they're in the funnel where they're going to end up at the bottom of the funnel. What we're looking for is, well, how do you truly right now get them in your funnel?
Interesting. Blake, David, you ready to add into that, or too deep?
I think the only thing that I have to say is with Andy is from what Andy had to share was a pain point for me is as we're looking at building and growing our institution, which is probably interesting in this climate, we are dedicating a lot of resources throughout the entire funnel. So a pain point for me is to be able to better differentiate where we need to be dedicating resources through the funnel, so I can make it more, so I can be using my resources more efficiently.
Okay, and Blake, some ideas there?
I think I have to echo the top of the funnel. Anything that can help us kind of unmuddy those waters. I think in that same presentation Keith was talking about, there was nationally stealth applications are down around 10%. So 1/5 of the pool that you might normally have from those stealth applicants aren't coming through. And so, some schools really rely on those students that find them first, and then they can massage them down the funnel from there. So anything that can help clear up the waters for top of the funnel, I think is what people in our profession are craving right now.
Okay, great. So we'll go ahead and take this in very much. I'm going to close this off. Have a terrific afternoon.
Thank you, everybody. That was a pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you very much. All the best for the rest of your cycle.
Thank you.
Thank you.